So here's how to remove these steering wheels. 2001, 2009, the V70, it's slightly different. The same for S60, XC70, XC90, the same things. So we are going to remove the steering wheel, the airbag, and also the clock spring or the angle sensor. That's what will sometimes give you an anti-skid message. That's one of the reasons the clock sensor goes bad. Just keep in mind a couple of things before I start the video. First of all, we need to undo the battery because we are disconnecting the airbag. It's really important. It's just a safety issue. You don't want to go to the dentist after your job. So disconnect the battery, and Volvo says wait 3 minutes. I would rather wait 10 minutes just to be sure all computers shut down. You won't activate the airbag when I put it back in or disconnect it. Next thing is that I know most of the times we need to use a flat screwdriver to press two tabs behind the steering wheel. I did notice some people say that some models, some years had the screw inside, perhaps a Phillips or a Torx one, so sometimes it doesn't work. I just don't know how to measure this screwdriver, but it's very thin one. It won't fit larger than this. It's not a standard one, and you have to put just to slide it in there almost all this length. So grab a long one, perhaps a bite like this, with a flat screwdriver, and it's a small one. I will perhaps just check the video description. I will measure it, because larger than this will not fit in there, and shorter than this will not reach for the tabs. That's one thing. Next thing is good to note that these clock spring sensor are different from STC and DSTC. This car is a STC. Now when we do this job, we need to turn the steering wheel to access the small holes. I'll just give you an idea about those holes. So this is just one of the holes, and then on the other side there's a second one. Again, very tiny hole, pretty deep actually, but you notice we turn the steering wheel, so we need to get the key into the ignition. After you disconnect the battery, get the key into ignition, turn it to position 2. Fortunately, I'm the junkyard, so this guy had the key. If you are at the junkyard and you don't have that key, the steering wheel will be locked and you just cannot access those two holes, so that's not funny. And we are going to leave that key there. The reason for this is that not only can I reach the holes to depress the airbag, but also you should not force on the lock, especially when we undo and we tighten the center board for the steering wheel. Otherwise we are going to damage the steering lock. So make sure the key is in the ignition. We are going to remove the center bolt. The center bolt, yet another point. By the way, guys, you just keep into the video, right? If you don't need this information, the center bolt has red Loctite on it. Torque, it's 30 Newton meters plus 30 degrees additional rotation. That's not a lot. I've heard if you try to turn it too much, torque it too hard, is going to damage something into the steering wheel. So use a correct torque range for this, and also very important, use red Loctite, because as I say, the torque is not much, and several people had a feeling afterwards that their steering lock got loose. So carefully. I've also noticed that that bolt, because it has an angle torque, it seems to be the stretch type, so in theory you need to replace it. Check your Volvo dealer for that matter. I also apologize for the camera shaking. It just doesn't have optical stabilization, this one. So let's just start with the first tab. I'm going to insert this screwdriver like this horizontally. The tabs are horizontal when the wheel is turned, so let's just insert it. You notice how deep it goes in there, and we are just going to pry down. Just put it, don't need to push on it, just go to the end. Make sure you have a long enough one, and then press down once. You notice the airbag pops a little bit. You notice how it did pop here. Let's put it back, and notice how I press down just with one finger. That's all. So it's really easy, but again, make sure you put it horizontally like this. Let's go on the other side. Insert, and here goes your airbag. Careful, don't pull on it too much because it has wires on it, obviously. Now, yet another very important thing: always when you work on this, keep your steering wheel centered. Let me see the wheels. The wheels are straight. Keep it always centered. And there are a few tricks. We need to put it back exactly like this in place, not rotating to with respect to the spline. And also there is a very important thing about the clock spring mechanism. It needs to be adjusted. Check out in the video, that's a really important part. Great, so now with the airbag toast a little bit, we are going to get to the connectors. But first, notice there is a rubber. Do not break it. Notice how the connectors come from inside the steering wheel. There is a connector there, we won't touch that one. The wires go like this underneath this rubber. That's really important because all these things just protect these wires, and you don't want to mess with that thing. So when you put it back, pass it under this rubber, and notice, just for your second information, how the wires kind of twist here and just cross each other. We are going to undo the connectors here at the airbag. Just toss it slightly on the side like this. There's not much space to work on it. Careful with this, it's very important you don't damage these parts. The way this guy disconnects, notice the green one on the left side of the steering wheel, the magenta one on the right side towards the center of the car, but there's also colors here, so don't worry about it. The way these guys go, we have tiny tabs here. There's the same on the other side, 2 tabs. Grab them both at once. The press is really not a big deal, just pull, very easy. It's just the angle. Let's try it again, gently with these guys, right? And that's it, not much harder than that. Let's just try to the other one. It's just I'm doing this with left hand, so it's a kind of awkward. Depress them well, fully, until you feel they just touch to the center, no longer depressing, and just give it a pull, and that's all. This is your airbag. Again, you see the colors there. And again, keep the steering wheel always centered when you work on it. Let's hope the camera will zoom. Come on, camera guy. Here you go. Now, because we are removing the steering wheel, let's just pass this wire, but notice how the green one sits on the left side, the magenta one on the right side. They kind of cross each other here, so let's just gently, without breaking that wire, that rubber wire, let's just pass them through underneath, and we are going to put them exactly the same way when we are going to place the steering wheel back in place. Careful, these wires are pretty stiff and large actually. We are going to disconnect this thing. This green connector here is just a tab. Press it fully, undo. And at this point we are going to attack the 18mm center wheel I was talking about. Again, when working on the bolt, have the K rotated, so the steering lock, it's not locked, it's not set, the steering wheel is free. Do not rely on the lock of the steering wheel to counter hold when you turn the bolt to remove it or to put it back. This is what I use just to try it. So you can also actually use a 3/8 ratchet with a 3 inches extension, 80mm socket, and just a small extension here. Just the ratchet is not enough, you won't be able to force on it, but otherwise it's really not that tight. It's tightish, but it's not that tight, just because actually the bolt has loctite, red one, not the blue one. So the red one is stronger actually, notice. So I encourage you, grab your red loctite and spray some more. I don't think this one, maybe it will be enough, the old one, but I'm not sure about it. Just one small detail, notice how these wires for the airbag pass above the wire for the green connector. Just notice how they sit in there, so you put it back in place the same way, just for your safety. And now we are going to undo the steering wheel, but there is yet another very important part. Do not skip on this one. Several have done it, have forgot about this. We are going to mark the steering wheel, that's the black area here around, with respect with the spline metal part. We are going to make a scratch on the black part and the same place a scratch on the metal part of the steering column shaft. That's, if you don't do that and you put back the steering wheel, rotate it a little bit, it will stay rotated when you drive the car. Don't forget about this small but important part. These are my two scratches right at the bottom. Obviously they need to be really aligned with each other as you look straight to the steering wheel. The clock spring has two parts, one that's fixed and one that moves with the steering wheel. So this, what you see here, is the part, rotating part. The clock spring needs to be adjusted in the specific position to the steering wheel. I'm going to talk about it. It's a yellow part in the window, and it has to be secure. This is just a adjusting clamp that's from the clock spring to the steering wheel. So we need to get that small tab inserted here when we place back the steering wheel. But also we need to set the clock spring at a certain rotation, and this is not a big deal, but this is why we actually want the steering wheel to be completely centered with the wheels completely straight. That when we are going to undo the steering wheel, these cables are really fiddly to pass by the hole. But remember, this is the old clock spring you are going to discard, but when you install the new one, very careful, don't pull on this connector here, you are going to damage it. You don't want that. So careful when you place back the steering wheel with the new clock spring mechanism sensor. It's now time to undo the steering wheel. These connectors, all three of them, and the wires here, which are kind of stiff and big, need to pass through that hole. Care a lot not to grab them when you remove it. I'm doing this one hand kind of. Again, don't drop the steering wheel. Hold it with your underhand and try to slide the connectors through those holes. Again, remember, this one comes at the bottom of the two others. Not going to film this, is not possible with one hand, but careful with this step. Don't pull on this wire on this connector again. This is your clock spring mechanism, by the way. I can say, if you have a friend, ask him to hold the steering wheel. Don't let it hang by this wire. That's just important. And also, you notice I did not bend any wire. I went remove it first, this one, then the green, and then the magenta came out very nicely. You notice the wire are not bent, it will just go back the same way they were in there. This is the clock spring mechanism. So let's just get to it. Toss the steering wheel on the side. This guy would need to undo for it. The bottom cover, I don't think you need to remove it fully, we'll just lower it, but there are three torques, and I believe it's T25, three of them. Let's just undo this. So the three bottom torque screws are out. We can now lower the cover, just flip it a little bit here on the side. I would recommend not removing K, so you don't forget about it, keep it there. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, these are tiny Phillips screws, so undo all of them. And then we have the connector for the clock spring mechanism. Just depress the tab here. You need to, sorry, I forgot about it, but you just need to undo the upper cover here. And I will just put a video at the end just how to undo this. So just check the end of the video about this. That's the connector here, gently remove it. And just a few words about this clock spring mechanism. Basically what it does, it has rotating contacts, electrical contacts for the airbag and also for the steering controls, the left one, the right ones. So if you have problems with the steering controls, both of them, it is possible that this clock spring mechanism is damaged. There's another situation when you don't have radio controls. That will happen most of the time if you don't have the original radio. Again, when you have, I just removed the steering wheel, and you notice this is the clock spring. It rotates normal. So let's see how this clock spring mechanism works. This is the center position of the steering wheel with the wheel centered. Now, normally the steering wheel will have 2.5 turns to one side, and then if you bring it back to center, it has 2.5 turns to the left side, and the same goes for the clock spring. So let's just start here. We are going to do one full turn, another one, and then it's a half turn, and it stops there. Don't force on it, you will damage it for sure. So let's just go back to the center. Half turn, one turn, second turn. Now the steering wheel is centered, the clock spring is centered. You notice the yellow tab is there. When we are going to place the new clock spring back in place, we are going to have this tab here and these two things aligned here. Let's just go to the other side. It should be 2.5 turns. This is 1, this is 2, and there should be stopping here at the halfway, like such. I'm really go very gently. I won't want to force it more than that, because basically what happens is you think this is not the steering locks like this. The steering will lock at the stops, but right now the steering column doesn't turn. So if you force on this guy, I would even say don't try to bring it to the end here. It's going to damage the contacts, absolutely sure. Let's just bring it back. Half turn, one turn, and notice the yellow tab comes into the window. It doesn't really matter if it's not perfectly aligned here. One other thing, so again, when we place back the new clock spring, the new sensor, we are going to place it in this position. Very important. When you are going to buy a new one, that's even more important. Volvo puts a small screw here. It's just Volvo wants it to stay centered when it's shipping in the box. Remove that screw. Don't forget this step. Do remove that small screw. Have it centered like this. No screw here. You see, there's no screw. If you leave that screw there, it will damage the sensor. Remember, this is very important. So when you put it back like this, you notice the tab is mostly to the center of the window. Don't worry if it's not perfect like this when you place back the steering wheel. That's not a worry for you, because we have these two tabs. One of them will come out here, the left one here. This tab will come out into that hole of steering wheel. So basically, if you position it correctly, if the wheels are centered, the steering is placed center. This small tab here will insert into the hole, and the clock spring will be adjusted to the steering wheel. That's what you want. You don't have to worry or stress about it. What happens if that someone just turns it one way like this fully, it also can insert, but the yellow tab is not there. You will get an anti-skid message, especially when you turn the wheel, even with a new sensor. So remember, if you have that light anti-skid when you place the new sensor, is because you didn't position it correctly. Remove the wheel, steering wheel, turn the thing normal like this, have the tab, steering wheel center, wheel centers, place the steering wheel, you are good to go. I'm about to place back the steering wheel. I need to pass the cable. It is very normal. The clock spring will rotate. Do not worry about it. You just pass that connector through the hole here at the end, and the clock spring will just be positioned correctly towards the steering wheel, and the small tab will get into that hole as well. So don't worry if it's rotating when you place back the cables. Now the cables are passed. I'm about to slide the steering wheel onto the column splines, and just watch here the clock spring. Just make sure you don't crush it. That small connector there, the black connector, make sure, just place your hand like this, just center it a little bit through that hole. Just center it a little bit through that hole while you insert the steering wheel on the splines. And also you have to check the spline alignment. You notice It's really no big deal. The clock spring will just kind of adjust. That connector will just come into this window, and now you notice that this lower tab of the clock spring has just popped into that hole. It means the clock spring is adjusted at the correct position with the steering wheel. Even though the steering wheel is a little bit rotating, the clock spring is really at the correct position. You won't have any problems with this. Now, final words, check out the scratches. Let me just show you, give you an example. You see mine. Let me just get a lamp. So those splines are pretty very thin. Perhaps you can see my scratches. Two of them are really aligned. Let me just turn the steering wheel one small rotation with respect with the spline, and just to show you how easy it's to not center it correctly. Okay, so now you see I'm filming straight forward towards the scratches. It's just the steering wheel is just one spline off, but it's very thin and it's very small displacement. But now the scratches are no longer aligned. Don't leave them like this. Of course, they need to be really close to each other, and when you scratch them, make sure you put them close to each other, because it's very easy to place the steering wheel just a shade on the side, but it's going to stay like this. So you don't want to do the car geometry again just for this reason. So place the steering wheel back properly in place and align the Mars as they should, not like this. Let me just go for it. Here we go. Now they are aligned. So it's just one spline off, and they are properly aligned. Now this is a XC90. I think the steering wheel is the same for V70, this thicker square model. And the tab, it's different on this one. There's still a tab in there. I did try to undo it, it didn't work the same way, and the hole is quite larger here, but there's still a tab in there. So give it a try, let us know how it works, and just comment in the video. Thanks. Now, for the sake of information, this is a S80 steering wheel until 2004 or 5, so it's an S80, the first year model. And it's very different. It's not at all like the S60 or XC90. It has a side torques. I would say that's a T25. I'm not sure about it. One of each side, on each side. You notice they are at an angle, and that's what you remove to undo the airbag. I can put one hand. Notice that's where the side. That's where the side screws attach to the airbag, and it looks like you have just one connector. Yeah, it's just one single connector. This is how to remove this cover. We need to remove them to have access to removing the steering wheel. So just flip down the lever, lower the steering wheel, and then we are going to flip this part up just like that, and then we are going to insert a finger right in here into the corner and pull on it. So pull from here. As you pull it a little bit, just insert your fingers more and more, and just give it a good good pull. I don't think I will do so for. Let's see. Just like that, and then when you get it a little bit lifted here, pull, give it a good kick. It should come out more or less easily. And just grab them like this, pull them from there. It's also my way. So just a bonus, here's how to undo these two switches here. These guys will not come out without removing the airbag from there. You need a T10, a very small Torx. Just undo this screw here on the side. Each of them has one. Then use a flat screwdriver, but get a small one, a tiny one with a tiny tip, thin tip, and insert it there gently, very gently, and then press to the left a little bit, just like that. Now the tab here will disappear and the switch unit will just came out. So go gently like that, a little bit of movement to the side, and the switch unit should be free to move out. Go gently. I think there is a connector that sits inserted there. So go like this, fiddly, just shaking it a little bit and then pull with some force. It feels like there is a resistance in there. The reason is that we have this connector, and this guy will basically uncouple, will just disconnect by itself as you pull it out. So there is a force, don't worry, just give it a good pull, constant pull, and it's gonna snap this open. Now when you place it back, it's very tricky because the place, you just cannot pull this guy out from there. So basically what I will do is just turn this guy like this, and just with one finger place that connector in there, and just with one finger place it in position, press it nicely back in place, rotate this guy, handle it a little bit to place it into its hole back in place. Notice there's kind of sliding here, places, sliding hooks. Connect it nicely. Again, don't forget to really push that connector back in place to clip, to make it click, and place the thing here. And let's just try the other one as well. This one also has that kind of connector there that will just snap open as you pull with some force on this. Again, just connect it back the same place. Notice there is a second connector here, so careful not to pull too much on this one. Just depress with a small screwdriver the top. I believe these switches are different from 2001 to 3, and then I think they were changed. It's not the same connectors from 2004 and up.